And it's the breaking news we are continuing to monitor here on HQ. Joel Embiid agreeing to a 3-year, $190 million max extension.
Oh, that's not good.
Jalen Brunson is back on the bench. He is available to return to action. He did not get anything done back there drastic.
Well, you mentioned it at the top. This is 34 different starting lineups. So how do you build consistency?
Final shot opportunity here for the Nets. And Watford travels.
By Fontecchio. Long outlet to Beasley against Embiid. And he slow rolled it.
Kelly Oubre, that he was just, look, watch this. You're just jogging back on defense. He expected Oubre to block that shot.
When looking at disappointing superstars of the 21st century, guys who have underwhelmed, come up short, and really not met expectations, one guy you think of immediately is of course Joel Embiid. As looking at Embiid back in the day, kind of the savior of Philadelphia, their version of Wilt Moses Malone, who led into prosperity and eventually an NBA championship. Now, unfortunately for Philly fans and Embiid, in the trust the process era, it led absolutely nowhere.
Embiid got Gallinari on him. Spins, lost the handle. Gallinari got a piece. Up is Gallinari, down it. 16 for Brown. Celtics by a dozen. Embiid blocked by Horford. Maxey with 2, with 1. Embiid's gonna have to put it up for the tie. Oh, he missed it.
That shit stinks.
The most damning part about Joel Embiid's legacy is in the postseason, he always came up short. And of course, till this day, is the only MVP ever in NBA history to never make the conference finals. And also equally as embarrassing, to get that MVP, he practically cried, begged, and whined for it non-stop in 2023. For Embiid's overall career, the only guy he can blame is Joel Embiid. As looking at some of his teams he's been a part of, I mean, absurdly stacked rosters that bordered on being super teams. And of course, even with numerous all-stars, superstars, some really great depth, came up short due to his own play or inability to remain healthy.
Oh, no. No! Ow.
Now, looking at Joel's current season, I mean, during this guy's prime, it is easily the worst of his career. As Joel, just 2 years ago, was of course an MVP, a top 10-ish player, some said top 5, and a respected star among all NBA fans. Embiid at this point, not respected by really anyone outside of Philly. And even in Philadelphia, it's 50-50. And this year the Sixers, like most years with Embiid, they're viewed as a dark horse, a secret contender to compete with Boston, New York, and of course Cleveland. But like every Embiid team, expectations, hopes are dashed very quickly. As looking at their so-called Big Three, that being Joel, Maxey, and Podcast P, to this point in the season they played a total of 10 games together. When you add someone like Paul George to a roster and to a team, for me personally, I scoff at it. Paul George's career, underwhelming, a playoff choker, overpaid and overrated, kind of like Joel Embiid. As looking at Philly right now with that Big Three, they are 20-37, 12th in the East, bottom 10 in offense, bottom 5 in defense, have lost 8 in a row, including 10 of 11.
All right, flush the bombers, get the subs in launch mode. We are at DEFCON 1.
Now, the one guy out of the Big Three who's kind of exempt from the criticism is, of course, Tyrese Maxey. As for all-star standards, even superstar standards, Maxey has been pretty fantastic and relatively healthy. But looking at his 2 co-stars, of course Joel Embiid, not healthy out of the lineup and just a shell of himself. And to add insult to injury, Joel Embiid this year ranks number 2 overall in salary among NBA players. And of course Paul George, not far behind, 7th place, and is under 50 mil. Those 2 contracts right there for Joel Embiid and Paul George, 2 of the worst contracts in the NBA, and the death knell for Philadelphia's present, as well as their future. And speaking of their future, it's actually somehow more bleak than their present, as Joel Embiid in 2029 making a staggering $70 million at age 35, and Paul George at age 38 in 2028 will making $57 million. So looking at both those guys, not only injury-prone players, playoff chokers, but vastly overpaid in two of the worst contracts in the NBA currently, as well as going forward. When you pay someone like Embiid, I kind of understand it. But paying Paul George $50 million, that's just an absolute blunder head-scratcher, one of the biggest gaffes for any NBA GM.
I've made a huge mistake.
And one thing I do want to hammer home, looking at guys like Paul George, Joel Embiid, fans in 25, 30 years' time, they'll probably look at the stats, the overall numbers, and say Embiid, you know, he was kind of underrated, underappreciated, and misunderstood. I'm here to tell you guys, that's far from the truth. Joel Embiid, if anything, was overrated his entire prime. And for someone like Paul George, even more so. These guys put up great numbers in the regular season, but come playoff time, it's an absolute disaster. And looking at both these guys, questionable work ethic, durability, and just questionable everything. From game to game, series to series, you don't know what you're going to get. And of course, both these guys being ringless, they're going to say, well, you know, Embiid didn't have tons of help, he had poor rosters, and even that's not true. This guy's had a Butler, a James Harden, and of course now Maxey. Paul George, a prime Westbrook, Melo, a little bit past his prime, as well as Kawhi Leonard. These guys have had help, great number 2 options, even great number 1 options, and still failed in the playoffs every single time. If you have consistently bad rosters, bad help, not a great number 2 option, and you fail in the playoffs, you get some grace. But if you have guys like a James Harden, a Butler, Kawhi Leonard, and you still fail in the postseason, that's inexcusable. And for someone like Paul George, I've got like zero sympathy. This guy coming out of LA said he was underpaid, underrated, and undervalued. Well, Paul George, nowadays, you're not any of these things. You're overpaid, overvalued, and over the hill. And even looking at Embiid, some fans might have sympathy, feel bad for him, you know, he's injured, hobbled, his career's in question. I kind of get that. But Embiid back in the day, I mean, this guy was a dirty, dirty player, diving at guys' knees, throwing cheap shots, just flailing his body over the place like a prime Draymond Green.
Quick double on Embiid.
Horford got into early foul trouble. He gives it up. Tatum drives. Flip doesn't go. And a foul call.
Raptors, Lakers, potentially the Sixers. After good years with the Spurs. Wow, that was a bad fall. Embiid goes right into the knee of John Collins.
Able underneath Anunoby on the block. Contact with Embiid. Shovel pass. Robinson is bumped. Boy, look out.
So that right there is the end of the video. And for players like Paul George, Joel Embiid, they honestly deserve each other. Their overall legacies, their peaks, their lows, they're eerily similar. And if you're like myself, bet against these guys constantly, you get proven right time and time again. And looking towards the future, I expect the exact same thing. Joel Embiid, age 30, isn't getting any younger, any healthier, any better as a basketball player. For Paul George, even right now in his mid-30s, in 4 years' time, we'll be approaching 40. For Philadelphia right now, their present is non-existent, and their future is beyond bleak. At the end of the day, Joel Embiid, he's cooked, overpaid, has no value to any team outside of Philly. And Paul George, the exact same thing. When you pair those two guys together, you get absolute disaster you could have seen coming from a mile away. So Philadelphia, enjoy your future, enjoy your present, because winning-wise, you're not going to be doing much. As always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.